Well, good afternoon, my dear friends, and we're getting ready for Shabbos. What a beautiful day. It's always special when we prepare for Shabbos. And, it's the last Friday of 2020. This is the last weekend, and so many people are looking forward to getting over this 2020. So much has gone on this past year. And, I just came across a series of one-liners that describe 2020. I figured I won't share all of them with you. We'll be here all day, but let me share these few that I think were pretty poignant. The dumbest thing I ever bought was a 2020 planner. Just think about where we were a year ago, what we were planning, and what actually happened. How about this one? The world has turned upside down. Old folks are sneaking out of the house and their kids are yelling at them to stay indoors. That happened a lot this past year. I know that from my own experience. Or how about this one? The warning is every few days, try your jeans on and make sure they fit. Pajamas will have you believe all is well in the kingdom. We got used to all these Zooms and remote work that we kind of took a little casual approach to our clothing, anything beyond what shows up on Zoom. But I like this one. Never in a million years could I have imagined I would go up to a bank teller with a mask on and ask for money. That's just a subtle indication of some of our lifestyle habits that have changed so drastically. And so many people you speak to say, wow, I just can't wait till next week to return to page to 2021. And I ask myself and I ask them, really? According to all accounts, on January 2021, we will be exactly where we are today. 2021 isn't going to be a magical one that all of a sudden everything's going to be back to normal. In fact, according to most predictions, a good chunk of 2021 is still going to be a continuation of what happened on 2020. So what are we looking forward to for 2021? When by and large, it could be very similar to this year, although the back end. And the answer, I think, is that although now January, February, March, maybe April, May, June, we're going to be continuing in this lifestyle that we have become accustomed to in the latter part of 2020, there's something in 2020 that will always remain forever connected to 2020 as much as we move on. Because what happened in 2020 won't happen again January 1st in 2021. In 2020, we had a drastic change in our life, something that we have never, ever imagined would happen. So many things that we have prepared for, so many tracks that we were on, so many trajectories that we were continuing upon, all of a sudden snapped. The floor was taken out from beneath us. That is what happened in 2020. An unusual change in the course of the events in our life. Now we're already become accustomed to. So although it's different than what we were used to, we have gotten accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Not in March and April 2020. That change, that seismic change in our life is something that is going to be uniquely connected to this year. And we have to ask ourselves, as we leave 2020, what is it that really shook us up during this past year? And what is the best lesson that we can take from this drastic change that took place? And my friends, one of the themes that we've come across in the many conversations that we've had over the past 8-9 months is that Torah may have been given to us thousands of years ago. But in this timeless document of Torah, there's always a timely message. And although the story and the portions of the Torah that we read and study every week were studied a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but we are different. And there's a message in this week's portion that is strikingly so similar to the times that we live in now. I can't make this stuff up. Every time we learn a parsha and I think about the story, it is so poignant, it's so relevant for the week that I'm experiencing at that moment. Because Torah is not just a storybook. Torah is actually, and I'm going to bring up a line here that I just saw this week. Torah is God's communication with mankind, God's communication with humanity. And therefore, there's a constant dialogue. So although the language may be ancient, the message and the communication tool is constantly fresh. And if I could bring up this, I took a snapshot of it. If I could bring this up, I want to share something very interesting that I saw online. One of the things that happened this past year was that recently, the passing of one of the great Talmudic and Torah giants of our generation, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. And I read this story that was posted online that I want to share with you. Once when I was younger and a bit cheeky, this fellow writes, I asked Rabbi Adin, Rabbi Steinsaltz, how is it possible to pray the same words and version every day and not become bored? Rabbi Steinsaltz looked at me with amused eyes and said, although the prayers are the same every day, you are not the same person as you were yesterday. So it's not boring. He then paused and says, and if you are the same person you were yesterday, then it isn't the prayer that is boring, it's you that's boring. And that's kind of Rabbi Steinsaltz's style. But what he's trying to teach us here is if you don't find relevance, it's because you haven't changed, not because the Torah hasn't changed. The Torah's message is constant. Only an infinite creator can find words that constantly are refreshed. And since our lives are constantly refreshed, the message is always different. And if it's not different, he's saying, maybe you really haven't grown that much. And therefore, it's the same message. But there's no doubt in anybody's mind that we have all changed. There's not one human being in this world alive today that has not changed from a year ago. And what does this week's Torah portion, which is a very famous story, not only amongst Jews, not only amongst non-Jews, but in theaters throughout the world, you will always see shows and Broadway shows of Joseph's colors. The story of Joseph, a brother who was abandoned by his 11 other siblings, 11 other brothers, who was thrown in a pit, then sold to foreigners and left in a distant land, had every reason to be resentful, had every reason to want to take revenge to these brothers who did this travesty to him. And as the story goes, although they sold him and thought they got rid of him, Joseph actually is sold to a group of people in Egypt and eventually climbs the ranks and becomes the viceroy of Egypt, who no less becomes the one who saves not only Egypt, but the entire region and his own family as well. So after 20 years of not seeing their brother and a father not seeing the son, forgetting about him, over 20 years, Joseph not forgetting about what his brothers did to him, in this week's portion comes a major confrontation between him and his brothers. For the brothers had to come down to Egypt. They had to come to him to get the food that they needed. And although they didn't recognize him, they forgot about him, he recognizes them. And he puts them through this process. He puts them through many challenges until this week portion, he breaks down. And when his brother Judah confronts him, Joseph says, I am Joseph. I am your brother. Imagine the power of that moment. Over 20 years of a sibling rivalry where there was no communication. Over 20 years after, brothers did the worst thing you can do to another brother. Basically, get rid of him, throw him to the dogs, literally and figuratively. This is a moment where they come together and there's a revelation to each other. Imagine what's going through the brothers' minds. Imagine what's going through their hearts. Regret, shame, fear. What's he going to do to us now? This is him. Look how hard he was with us over the last few months. What's going to be now? He's going to kill us. And what does Joseph say immediately? And this is one of the, I would say, the most fundamental teaching of Judaism for every situation, for every generation. What does Joseph say? Joseph tells them, fear not, my brothers. Don't be afraid, because it wasn't you. V'ata lo atem shlachtem oti. It wasn't you who sent me down into the land of Egypt. It wasn't you who put into motion all the sequence of events that brought us here. He ha'elokim. It was God, the Lord, it was God. It was our creator of the universe who orchestrated all these things to happen so that I can be here to save you. So although it took on a certain course of events that may have been the result of our rivalry, but don't think that I have resentment to you, because I have seen the pathway that God has created. And if this would not have happened, we wouldn't even be here alive today to speak about it. Think of the power of the moment. Think of the clarity in Joseph's mind. If you talk about a story of twists and turns, what happened in Joseph's lives, what happened in 2020 pales to what happened in Joseph's life. The twists and the turns and the constant change and the constant unsettledness of his life. Anything that could have driven anyone off the wall, driven anyone crazy. But Joseph teaches us a lesson, that we have to look a little deeper into the events that happen in our life. Everything that happens in our life is for a purpose, is for a greater good. If someone is harsh to you, if someone is negative to you, of course you have your emotional feelings. I'm sure Joseph felt a lot of resentment. He was human. But if Torah and our tradition teaches us anything, it is, although you are okay, you're right to be upset at what a person has wronged you, never ever think that the result of that is in vain. There is always a reason. There is always a purpose. And if the twists and turns in Joseph's life led him to believe that, the past year in our life must lead us to understand that we could only do what we can do. But there's always a greater force underlying everything taking place in our life to allow us to move and achieve greater things. The only thing that it depends on is you and I. God orchestrates things. It is our choice to see the positive, to see the growth opportunity in a challenge, or to allow the challenge to define you and put you down. That's what's your choice. I had a conversation with one of my children this week about optimist, a pessimist. And then I told them, you know what? There is no such thing as an optimist or a pessimist. Optimism and pessimism is a choice. You are a human being. You may be disposed to see things more positively. You may be disposed to see things more negatively, but you always have a choice to override your negative disposition and force yourself to see things positive, because there are positive things in everything that happens in our life. You can choose to define your reaction by the negativity. You can choose to define the reaction by a positive thought. And that's the story of Joseph. Joseph chose not to be bitter about all the negative that happened, but to see the positive that grew out of that and allow that to be his shining light. And that's why Joseph becomes one of the greatest heroes of the Torah. And that's why the message of Joseph is so relevant for us in our times, where our life is so disrupted. We still don't know what's going on. There's hope of a vaccine. There's hope of things getting back to normal. But what we have learned in 2020 is you never know. And you never know what the next day will bring. So be focused on the positive of today. Generate greater positivity. Live the life that Joseph has taught us. The twists and turns in his life showed him the greater positive that it led to. Hopefully that can inspire us as well. And I want to share the following story and conclude with this that I heard this week, where a person had every right to be angry, had every right to be upset, had every right to be resentful, but chose a different path. This is a story of a teacher in an Israeli village, Israeli town, who was a teacher in a Jewish day school, and as a teacher wasn't making that great of an income. So he decided, in addition to teaching his children, he offered the other people in the moshav, the other people in the village, in the town, that the kids he was teaching, you know what, I will bring them to school as well. So this way, not only did he earn an income of teaching, he was also able to earn an income of driving the children to school. Well, it was one hot summer day. It was a scorching heat wave in Israel. So just a few years ago. And for some reason, when school was over and he went back to his car, he realized something that we would never, ever want to see. That in the morning, when he drove kids to school, one of the children fell asleep. And he was late. And he ran out and he went to his class. And unfortunately, this little boy died from the heat that he caused by being closed in this car and asleep on this hot day. You can imagine the tragic feeling of the town, of the village. You could imagine the tragic feeling of the parents. And in fact, they were so upset. They were so angry. And he was so embarrassed. In fact, he wasn't only embarrassed, but he was arraigned because he did something illegal. During Shiva, the grandfather of this young child turns to the parents and says, you know, you lost a child. But this teacher has 3 young children at home. We can't allow those 3 children to lose their father. And he encouraged and he inspired the children, as hurtful, as painful as this is. Let's try to connect and help that father. Let's try to connect and help him grow out of this painful experience. And they insisted that this father come and visit them during Shiva. He would never dare visit them. He was so embarrassed. But they said, just come for a few moments. We feel your pain. Come be with us in this tragedy. And he came, and then he went back to his cell. And then when there was the sentencing or the decision if they should prosecute or not, the grandfather who was there was asked to testify. And he takes out a piece of the Talmud. And just to paraphrase what the Talmud says, that if a butcher cuts his left hand with a knife in his right hand, do you punish the right hand? It's obviously a rhetorical question. So of course you don't, because you're going to punish and cut off one hand, you're going to hurt the other hand anyway. And this he tells the judge, we are one family. If you're going to punish him, the teacher, the driver, you're punishing us. And then we ask you to not prosecute. The judge was taken aback by this commitment to these 2 Jewish individuals. It's so unusual that not only they're not fighting, but he's trying to help him out and they don't want to prosecute. And the judge decided, instead of putting him in jail, to do a sentence of community service. But the story doesn't end there. A year later, this teacher and this driver had a child. A little boy was born to him and his wife. And they named the child Chaim, after the boy who passed away in the back car. That doesn't happen if you don't feel connected to the people who had every right to prosecute and put you in jail. This is a story that didn't happen in Joseph's times, but is certainly the story of Joseph in our time. We have a choice to take situations in our life where you have every right to be resentful and every right to be angry, to turn that into a positive experience. And I believe that this is what 2020 will teach us. In each and every one of our lives, there are people that you haven't spoken to. You have every right to be angry with. You have every right to be resentful about or for. But does that really pay? Does it really pay to be disconnected from people you love over something they have wronged you justifiably? Or is it time to change that direction and pick up a call, send an email, send a letter, reach out, and try to mend a relationship that was broken? You will see, you will gain a lot more from mending a relationship that was broken than keeping a relationship broken forever. Let 2020 teach us that sometimes things need to change 180 degrees. Sometimes we are forced into situations that just change our trajectory 180 degrees. Sometimes we don't have the choice to do that. The story of Joseph says that many times you do. So let's make that choice. And let's make that choice in a way that we go back into 2020 and don't say goodbye, but we look back as that moment that inspired us to accomplish great things in our life. In fact, in Israel, how do they say goodbye? Lehitraot. Lehitraot means we'll see you again soon. That means we don't really say goodbye. We may be parting, but our relationship is continuing. And so may it be with the lessons of the past secular year of 2020. It would be tragic if we move on from the great and beautiful things that we could find from the past year. And there are many. Let's say lehitraot to 2020, not goodbye, and take the message, the most powerful message that God could have ever taught us through bringing us into this situation, that we make the choices that this can bring and through which we can grow. I want to wish you all a good Shabbos. I want to wish you all a restful weekend as things are a little bit toned down in the world that we live in. And let's prepare ourselves, not just for next year, not just for next week, not just for tomorrow, but tonight to sit around the Shabbos table, look at the beautiful Shabbos candles, and draw from this great inspiring energy that we call Shabbos. So, as I sign off and say good Shabbos, we'll go around to the comments. And if people are want to share each other good Shabbos, I have some messages here already. This is the time to do so. So Anita, right? Anita, thank you very much. Very powerful message. Thank you, Anita. It's always good to see you. Judy Reese, good Shabbos. Good Shabbos to you. You have something to share here? Yeah, thank you for expressing how I feel about making something better from the worst. Yes, Judy. You're a good role model for us in learning that, and we only want to wish you joy and happiness in everything going forward. Good Shabbos. Oh, wow, it's a friend of mine. Good Shabbos, Rabbi Shem Tov, you're a good friend. Thanks for your sermonette. Great vart from Rabbi Adin. Yes, Yossi, thank you. You're also a good friend, and many people know that. Anybody else want to wish good Shabbos? Yes, Jason. Jason, here you are. Jason Waxman, good Shabbos to you. Harris Abrams, great message. Thanks, Rabbi. Good Shabbos to one and all from Karen and me. Yes. Thank you, Harris. Did I do Razel? Razel, thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos to everybody. Let's go up the list here. Cheryl. Tsiona is my role model for this, 100%. Tsiona, hope you're doing well. And best wishes to everybody in the family. Ellie, thank you for the connection. This is what you're, thank you. But the point here is not to talk about me, my friends. I want you to thank you, Ellie, for those kind words. Let's wish each other good. Oh, there you are. Ellie does wish good Shabbos. You know what? Maybe I'll start from the top. Good Shabbos, everyone, from Ellie. Good Shabbos from Claire. Let's see who else is wishing good Shabbos. Anita. Good Shabbos. Yes, let me see if there's anyone else before we sign off. Yeah, we have a few more good Shabbos. Irene, Shabbat Shalom. Not Irene, that's Francine. Francine, good Shabbos to you and your wonderful family. Yes, we do have Irene. Irene is wishing everyone good Shabbos. Dalit Weiss, Berlin, Dalit, good Shabbos, Rabbi, and everyone. Thank you very much. And since Shabbos is coming, I'm going to sign off. I don't see any more messages, but those who want to send messages, they'll definitely continue on either Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching it. And I hope everyone really has a good and meaningful Shabbos and a wonderful weekend. All the best.